You know, deep beneath our cities, there's this incredible, invisible world that's constantly at work. We're talking about a whole ecosystem of microorganisms just tirelessly cleaning our water so it's safe to go back into the environment. But what happens when that microscopic world gets, well, poisoned? Let's dive into that. And that's a really serious question because you have to remember the heart of our wastewater treatment, it's alive. It's not just pipes and filters, it's these vast communities of bacteria and other tiny organisms breaking down all our waste. So imagine what happens if a sudden flood of toxic chemicals hits the plant. It can literally kill off these essential little workers, causing a total system-wide failure. I mean, the entire treatment process can just grind to a screeching halt. So, here's the challenge we're up against. Modern wastewater isn't just, organic stuff. It's this complex, soupy cocktail of industrial chemicals, pesticides, heavy metals, even pharmaceuticals from our medicines. And every single one of those can be a silent threat, a poison to the very microorganisms we absolutely depend on to keep our water clean. Okay, so to protect these vital systems, we have to be really vigilant. That's where toxicity testing comes in. And it's crucial for four main reasons. First, you can think of it as a guard, right? It protects the whole process from those sudden, nasty, toxic shocks. Second, it helps engineers figure out the best way to pre-treat industrial waste before it even gets into the main system. Third, it's a real-time diagnostic tool. It lets us know if something is slowing the process down right now. And finally, it helps us play detective and pinpoint exactly which harmful chemical is causing all the trouble. So the big question is, how do you even detect an invisible threat like this? I mean, sure, we could run all sorts of complex chemical analyses, but there's a much more elegant and honestly a cooler solution. Why not just ask the organisms themselves? This is where we call in nature's own tiny detectives. The whole idea behind this is something called a bioassay. It sounds technical, but the concept is super simple. Instead of hunting for specific chemicals one by one, we just take a sample of the wastewater and introduce it to a group of microorganisms that we know are healthy. And then we watch their reaction. Do they get sick? Do they stop growing? Their response tells us directly if the water is harmful. They're basically the ultimate canaries in the coal mine for water quality. And get this, one of the most fascinating bioassays out there uses a special kind of bacteria that has what you could almost call a superpower. It literally glows in the dark. Right. This method is called the microtox test. It uses a specific marine bacterium. Its fancy name is Vibrio fischeri. And what's so cool about these little guys is that they naturally produce light. They're like tiny living light bulbs. So the test itself is brilliantly simple. You just measure how their light changes when you expose them to a water sample. So here's exactly how it works. It's a really neat process. Step 1, you start with your healthy bacteria, and they're all glowing away, emitting a constant level of light. Step 2, you add your wastewater sample to the mix. Then, a super sensitive machine measures what happens to that light. And here's the key. If the light starts to dim, that's your warning sign. It means the bacteria are stressed out or even dying. The less light they put out, the higher the toxicity. It's a direct, measurable signal that something is wrong. And just so you know, this isn't some theoretical concept from a textbook. It's a real tool that gets used in labs and treatment plants every single day. What you're looking at here is a microtox analyzer. This machine is built specifically to measure those incredibly faint changes in the bacteria's light, giving operators a fast, reliable toxicity reading in just a matter of minutes. But, these glowing bacteria aren't the only detectives on the case. Not by a long shot. Scientists have actually developed a whole toolkit of different biological tests, where each tool is suited for a different situation or a different kind of toxin. So let's check out a few of the other tools they have at their disposal. So instead of just looking at the overall health of the organism, sometimes we need to zoom way in and look at its internal machinery. A great way to think about this is to picture enzymes as the tiny little engines that power every single reaction happening inside a cell. And just like with a car, if those engines start to sputter or shut down completely, well, you've got a serious problem. And this chart gives you a sense of the variety here. You can see there are different tests for different enzymes. For instance, dehydrogenase assays, those are pretty much the workhorse in a lot of wastewater plants. But then you have others, like esterase assays, which are really, really sensitive to things like pesticides. So by measuring the activity of these different engines, we can start to get some really good clues about what kind of toxin we might be dealing with. And the toolkit keeps on growing. We can also use green algae. We just see if their growth is inhibited, which turns out to be a fantastic indicator for stuff like herbicides and heavy metals. Or We can keep a close eye on nitrifying bacteria. Now, these guys are absolutely critical for processing nitrogen in wastewater, but they're also super sensitive to a lot of toxins. That sensitivity actually makes them excellent little watchdogs. Okay, so we've got all these amazing scientific methods, which is great. But how do they actually get put into practice? Well, they get packaged into these ready-to-use commercial test kits that can be used right where they're needed most. It's all about taking the science from the research lab and putting it directly onto the treatment plant floor. And you can really see the range of options available right here. Over on the left, that's the more traditional, super precise lab equipment like the microtox analyzer we talked about earlier. But then look over on the right. That's something totally different. It's a portable, all-in-one field kit. This is a game changer because it lets you do rapid testing right there on the spot. All right, to make this feel a little more real, let's actually walk through the steps for one of these field kits. We're going to look at the MET-PAD test, which is designed specifically to sniff out heavy metal toxicity.
It's a pretty straightforward procedure, actually. You basically rehydrate the bacteria, mix them with the water sample, and then just let them incubate for a bit. After that, you put a few drops onto these special assay pads, and then comes the key step. You wait and watch for a purple color to develop. The intensity of that purple tells you everything. A really weak or faded color means the bacteria's enzymes got hammered by heavy metals, signaling that the water has high toxicity.
Now, it's important to know that most of the tests we've looked at so far are like general alarms. They're great at telling you if the water is toxic, but not what's making it toxic. The next frontier is all about specificity, and this is where biosensors come into play. These are amazing little organisms, usually bacteria, that have been genetically engineered to react to one specific chemical. So they don't just tell you, hey, there's a problem here. They tell you, hey, the problem is mercury, or the problem is arsenite. They're like highly specialized single-target detectives. And all of this really leads us to a final big thought. We truly rely on this invisible army of microorganisms to protect our water. We figured out how to listen to them, how to understand their warnings. But here's the thing. Thousands of new chemicals enter our environment every single year. The challenge is constantly evolving. So the real question for the future is this. How are we going to keep innovating and training these tiny natural detectives to spot the threats that we haven't even invented yet?